The gunshot echoed across the prairie as Jessie Blackburn clutched her bleeding side, her horse galloping at breakneck speed through the moonlit Nevada landscape. Behind her, the distant whistles and shouts of lawmen faded as she pushed her exhausted mount toward the shadow of a distant homestead. Her vision blurred as pain radiated through her body, the satchel of stolen money still clutched tightly against her chest, the last remnant of the Cimarron gang's final job, and her only chance at a new beginning. Vincent Zachariah stood on the porch of his modest ranch house, 5 miles outside of Yerington, Nevada, a cup of coffee steaming in the cool May evening of 1885. At 32, Vincent had carved out a solitary existence after returning from the war. His days were marked by honest work and the company of his livestock rather than people. As he gazed toward the distant hills, the unexpected sight of a horse and rider approaching at an unsteady pace broke the usual stillness of his property. "What in tarnation?" he muttered, setting down his cup and stepping off the porch. The rider swayed dangerously in the saddle, and as they drew closer, Vincent realized it was a woman, her dress stained dark with what could only be blood. Before he could reach her, she slipped from the saddle, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Vincent rushed forward, kneeling beside her crumpled form. She was young, perhaps 25, with wild auburn hair escaping from beneath a battered hat. Her face, though smudged with dust and pain, held a striking beauty that caught him off guard. "Madam, can you hear me?" Vincent asked, gently turning her to assess her injuries. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing amber irises that immediately filled with panic. She attempted to push him away, but weakness and pain overcame her determination. "Leave me," she gasped, clutching at her side where blood seeped through her fingers. "They might follow." "Nobody's following you this far out," Vincent assured her, noting with concern the pallor of her skin. "You're bleeding badly. Let me help you." She tried to protest again but lost consciousness, her head lolling against his arm. Vincent hesitated only briefly before lifting her. The responsible thing would be to fetch the sheriff, but one look at the rapidly spreading bloodstain convinced him that she wouldn't survive the journey to town. Whatever trouble she was in, she needed immediate care. With a decisive motion, he lifted her in his arms, surprised at how light she felt despite the gravity of her presence. As he carried her toward the house, he noticed the bulging saddlebag still attached to her horse. He'd check that later first. This woman needed tending. Inside his modest home, Vincent cleared his kitchen table with one sweep of his arm and laid her down carefully. Working quickly, he gathered clean cloths, a basin of water, his small medical kit, and the whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes. Years spent patching up injured soldiers had given him skills he'd hoped never to use again. By lamplight, Vincent cut away the blood-soaked fabric around her wound, revealing a bullet hole that had torn through her side. He breathed a sigh of relief when he determined it had passed clean through, missing vital organs. Still, she had lost a dangerous amount of blood. "This is going to hurt, miss," he said, though she couldn't hear him. He doused the wound with whiskey, noting her unconscious flinch, then began the meticulous work of cleaning and stitching both the entry and exit wounds. Throughout the night, Vincent sat beside her, changing the dressings and coaxing water between her lips when she stirred. By dawn, her fever had begun, and he settled in for what he knew would be a long battle. 3 days passed in a haze of tending to the mysterious woman. Vincent barely slept, constantly checking her temperature and changing the bandages. He'd moved her to his bed, taking to a bedroll on the floor beside her. Her fever broke on the morning of the 4th day, and as the sun streamed through the window, she finally opened her eyes with true awareness. Vincent was dozing in a chair beside the bed, when he sensed movement. Looking up, he found himself caught in the direct gaze of those amber eyes, now sharp with suspicion. "Where am I?" Her voice was raspy from disuse. "My ranch outside Yarrington," he answered, offering her water. "I'm Vincent Zachariah. You showed up half dead on my property 4 nights ago." She accepted the water cautiously, wincing as she tried to sit up. 4 nights. Alarm flashed across her face. "My horse is fine. In the barn with mine," Vincent assured her. "Your belongings are there too." A flash of relief crossed her features, followed quickly by wariness. "You didn't look through my things." Vincent held her gaze steadily. "Just enough to find something to call you by, but there wasn't anything with a name." It wasn't entirely true he'd seen the money, more cash than most honest folk would carry, but had decided that was a conversation for when she was stronger. She hesitated before answering. "Jessie. My name is Jessie Blackburn." "Well, Miss Blackburn, you've got a bullet wound that's healing nicely, but you lost a fair amount of blood. You'll need to rest here a while longer." "I can't stay," she said, attempting to rise again before gasping and falling back. "You can and you will," Vincent said firmly. "Unless you'd prefer I fetch the sheriff to sort this out." At the mention of the sheriff, Jessie's face paled further. "No, no lawmen. Then it's settled. You'll stay until you can at least stand without reopening those stitches." Jessie regarded him warily. "Why would you help a stranger?" "What do you want in return?" The question held an edge that suggested she'd rarely encountered kindness without conditions. Vincent shrugged. "Nothing. Folks help each other out here. It's how we survive." She didn't look convinced, but exhaustion was already pulling at her. "I'll be gone as soon as I can ride," she murmured as her eyes drifted closed. "We'll see about that," Vincent replied to her sleeping form, wondering what kind of trouble he'd brought into his home. Over the next 3 days, Jessie drifted in and out of consciousness. During her lucid moments, Vincent provided broth and water, helping her regain strength. She spoke little, answering direct questions with minimal information. She claimed to be from Missouri originally, traveling west on her own. The bullet wound she attributed to a misunderstanding, offering no further details. Vincent didn't press her, recognizing the walls she'd built around herself. Instead, he focused on her recovery, telling her about his small ranch, the drought they'd been facing, and his hopes for the next cattle season. He wasn't sure if she was listening, but the sound of conversation seemed to ease the tension that radiated from her. On the 7th day after her arrival, Vincent entered the bedroom to find the bed empty. Panic surged through him until he spotted her through the window, standing unsteadily by the corral. He hurried outside. "You shouldn't be up yet," he called, approaching her carefully. Jessie leaned heavily against the fence, her face pale with the effort of standing. "I needed air." "And to check if your horse was still here," Vincent asked knowingly. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Can you blame me? I suppose not." He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the horses grazing peacefully. "You planning to tell me what really happened to you?" Jessie stiffened. "I told you. You told me a story we both know isn't true," Vincent interrupted gently. "I'm not asking to judge you, but I found the money, Jessie." Her head snapped toward him, eyes wide with alarm. "You had no right, you're right." "I didn't. But when a bleeding woman shows up at my door with enough cash to buy half the county, I get curious." Jessie's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her as quickly as it had come. "Are you turning me in?" Vincent studied her face, seeing beyond the defiance to the fear beneath. "No, not yet anyway, but I'd like the truth." For a long moment, Jessie said nothing. Then she nodded toward the house. "Can we sit? I'm not as strong as I thought." Vincent offered his arm, which she reluctantly accepted. Once settled on the porch with cups of coffee, Jessie stared out at the landscape before speaking. I rode with the Cimarron gang for 2 years, she finally said, her voice low. We robbed trains mostly, banks sometimes. I was good at it small, fast. People didn't suspect me. She glanced at him, gauging his reaction. When he remained silent, she continued. The last job went wrong. The others were killed in a shootout. I got away with the money, but not before taking a bullet. And the law is after you, Vincent concluded. Jesse nodded. There's a $500 bounty on my head. The Cimarron Rose, they call me in the papers. There was no pride in her tone, just weary acceptance. Why join an outlaw gang in the first place? The question hung between them, and for a moment Vincent thought she wouldn't answer. Then she sighed, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger. My father died when I was 16. My mother remarried a man who... She paused, her jaw tightening. He wasn't a good man. When I turned 18, I ran. Tried working honest jobs, but a young woman alone doesn't have many options. Then I met Wade Cimarron. He offered protection, adventure, more money than I'd ever seen. It seemed better than the alternatives. Vincent absorbed her words, remembering the desperation he'd seen in so many faces during the war, people doing what they had to in order to survive. And now I have enough to start over somewhere. California, maybe, or up to Oregon, somewhere no one knows me. She met his eyes directly. I never killed anyone, if that matters. I was just the distraction, or the one who could slip in unnoticed. Vincent nodded slowly. It matters. He stood, stretching his back. You should rest more. We can talk about what comes next tomorrow. As he turned to go inside, Jesse caught his wrist. Her touch was light, but it sent an unexpected warmth through him. Why are you alone out here, Vincent Zachariah? A man with your kindness should have a family. The question caught him off guard, personal in a way their conversation hadn't been. That's a story for another day, he replied, gently freeing his wrist. Rest, Jesse. You're safe here for now. He walked inside, aware of her gaze following him, wondering if he was making a terrible mistake by harboring a known outlaw, and why the thought of her leaving already troubled him so much. As days turned into weeks, Jesse's strength returned gradually. Though Vincent insisted she continue to take his bed while he slept on a pallet in the main room, she began helping with small chores around the house. She proved surprisingly capable in the kitchen, transforming Vincent's basic supplies into meals that reminded him of home-cooked food he hadn't tasted since before the war. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, Vincent found himself studying her profile. The hardness that had defined her features when she first arrived had softened, though wariness still lingered in her eyes. You're staring, she said without turning, just wondering who you might have been if life had dealt you different cards. Jesse smiled faintly. I wonder that myself sometimes. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. What about you? You never did tell me your story. Vincent leaned back in his chair, considering how much to share. Not much to tell. Grew up in Pennsylvania, fought for the Union, came west after the war looking for peace and quiet. And found it in the middle of nowhere, Jesse observed. But there's more to it than that. I can see it when you think no one's watching. Vincent was silent for a long moment, surprised by her perception. I was a field medic, he finally said. Saw things no man should see, did my best to save boys who shouldn't have been there at all. He rubbed his thumb along a scar on his palm. When it was over, I couldn't stand being around people. Too many ghosts following me. So you came here to escape, just like I'm trying to do. I suppose I did. He glanced at her. Though sometimes I wonder if we ever really escape our pasts, or just learn to carry them differently. Jessie considered this, her face thoughtful in the fading light. Maybe, but I'd like the chance to try. 2 days later, Vincent rode into Yarrington for supplies, leaving Jesse with strict instructions to stay out of sight. The small town was bustling with its usual activity, miners from the nearby operations mingling with ranchers, and the occasional traveler passing through on the way to California. At Miller's General Store, Vincent collected flour, coffee, and other necessities while casually listening to the local gossip. His blood ran cold when he heard the name Cimarron Gang mentioned by two men examining wanted posters on the community board. "Says here the female member is still unaccounted for," one was saying. $500 is good money for one little lady. "If you can find her," the other replied. "Word is she might have died from her wounds out in the desert somewhere." "For $500, I'd be willing to check every grave and gulch between here and Sacramento." Vincent kept his face impassive as he paid for his purchases. "Trouble coming our way?" he asked Tom Miller casually. The shopkeeper nodded. "U.S. Marshal arrived yesterday. Looking for that female train robber from the Cimarron Gang. Apparently they tracked her somewhere in this area before losing the trail." "That's so." Vincent kept his tone neutral. "Well, best of luck to him. Doubt she'd stick around these parts if she had any sense." As he loaded his wagon, Vincent spotted the marshal exiting the sheriff's office across the street. He was a lean, hard-looking man with a face weathered by sun and determination. Their eyes met briefly, and Vincent nodded politely before climbing onto his wagon and heading home, fighting the urge to rush. When he arrived back at the ranch, he found Jessie hanging laundry, her movements still careful around her healing wound. The domesticity of the scene struck him, how natural she looked there, as if she belonged. The thought was immediately followed by concern for her safety. "We have a problem," he said without preamble, quickly explaining about the marshal. Jessie's face drained of color. "I need to leave, tonight." "And go where?" Vincent asked. "They're watching the roads and trails. You'd be caught before you reach the next town." "I can't stay here. I won't bring trouble to your door after all you've done." Vincent ran a hand through his hair, thinking quickly. "The marshal doesn't know about me or this place specifically. We're remote enough that they might not come searching random homesteads. And if they do, then we'll say you're my wife, come to join me recently." The words came out before he fully considered them, and he saw Jessie's eyes widen in surprise. "It would explain why no one in town knows you," he added hastily. Jessie studied him, her expression unreadable. "You'd lie to a U.S. Marshal for me." "I've already hidden a wanted outlaw for nearly 3 weeks," Vincent pointed out. "In for a penny, in for a pound." A small smile touched Jessie's lips. "That's quite a risk, Mr. Zachariah." "Better than the alternative," he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. That night, they moved Jessie's horse to a small hidden corral behind the barn and buried her saddlebags with the money under the floorboards in the house. Vincent gave her one of his mother's old rings that he kept as a memento, in case anyone should question their supposed marriage. As Jessie slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, she looked up at Vincent with conflicted eyes. "Thank you, though I'm not sure I deserve your help." Vincent found himself taking her hand, the touch lingering longer than necessary. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Jessie, even outlaws." For the next 2 days, they lived in tense anticipation, jumping at every distant sound of horses. Vincent went about his ranch work, keeping close to the house, while Jessie maintained a careful vigilance from the windows. The pretense of normalcy was strained, but beneath it, something else was growing, a comfort in each other's company that neither had expected. On the 3rd morning, Vincent spotted dust on the horizon, riders approaching along the main road. "They're coming," he called to Jessie, who immediately moved away from the window. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Be my wife," Vincent said simply. "Follow my lead and remember the details we discussed." Jessie nodded, quickly pinning her hair up in a more respectable style and donning one of his mother's old dresses that they'd altered to fit her. By the time hoofbeats sounded in the yard, she was standing in the kitchen, preparing coffee as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Vincent stepped onto the porch, noting the marshal and two deputies dismounting. "Afternoon, gentlemen. What brings the law all the way out to my humble place?" The marshal, who introduced himself as Marshal Daniel Reed, tipped his hat. "Just making inquiries at all the properties in the area, Mr. Zachariah. We're tracking a fugitive female member of the Cimarron gang. Trail led us to this region before going cold." "Haven't heard about any gang members out this way," Vincent replied easily. "Though news travels slow to these parts." Reed's sharp eyes scanned the property. "Mind if we take a look around? Standard procedure." "Not at all. Though I'd appreciate if you'd be quick about it. My wife's not been feeling well and too much excitement isn't good for her condition." The marshal's eyebrows rose slightly. "Wife? Town folks mentioned you lived alone. Recently married," Vincent explained with a smile. "Jessica came out from Pennsylvania last month. We knew each other as children. Haven't had much reason to go into town to spread the news." As if on cue, Jessie appeared in the doorway, one hand resting protectively over her still healing side, a gesture that, to unknowing eyes, might suggest an expectant mother's instinct. "Vincent, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice carrying just the right amount of concern. "Just fine, dear," Vincent assured her, moving to her side and placing an arm around her waist. "These men are looking for an outlaw in the area. They need to search the property." Jessie's eyes widened convincingly. "An outlaw, here?" She clutched Vincent's arm. "Should I be worried?" Marshal Reed studied her carefully. "No need for concern, madam, just doing our due diligence." He turned to his deputies. "Check the barn and outbuildings." While the deputies conducted their search, Reed asked several questions about their movements over the past month, when exactly Jessie had arrived, and whether they'd noticed anything unusual. Vincent answered calmly, weaving truth with fiction, while Jessie played the role of devoted wife with surprising conviction, offering coffee and biscuits with trembling hands that could be attributed to fear of outlaws rather than fear of discovery. When the deputies returned, reporting nothing suspicious, Reed seemed satisfied, though his eyes lingered on Jessie's face a moment too long for comfort. "Well, thank you for your cooperation, Mr. and Mrs. Zachariah. If you see or hear anything unusual, the sheriff in Yarrington will know how to reach me." He tipped his hat to Jessie. "Congratulations on your marriage and future happiness." They watched from the porch as the lawmen rode away, maintaining their embrace until the dust had settled behind them. Only then did Jessie's composure crack, her body sagging against Vincent's. "They're gone," Vincent murmured, his arm still around her waist. "You were convincing." "So were you," she replied, looking up at him with eyes bright with relief and something else he couldn't name. "For a moment there, I almost believed we were truly married." Their faces were close, the pretense of their relationship suddenly feeling less like an act and more like a possibility neither had considered before. Vincent felt himself drawn toward her, his free hand lifting to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. Before he could give in to the impulse, Jessie stepped back, breaking the connection. "We should check if they really left," she said, her voice unsteady. "They might circle back." Vincent nodded, dropping his arm and immediately missing her warmth. "You're right. I'll ride out and make sure they're headed back to town." As he saddled his horse, Vincent pondered the moment that had just passed between them, wondering if he had imagined the pull he felt toward this woman who had crashed into his life so unexpectedly. A woman who, despite her past, was awakening feelings he'd thought long dead. The marshal and his men did indeed return to Yarrington, but the close call made it clear that Jesse's presence in the area remained dangerous. That evening, as they sat by the fireplace discussing options, Vincent proposed a solution he'd been considering since the lawman's visit. "There's a place in the mountains," he said, tracing a route on an old map spread between them. "A cabin that belonged to a friend from the war. He left it to me when he passed last year. It's remote, well hidden. You could stay there until the search dies down." Jessie studied the map, her finger following his. "How far?" "2 days' ride, rough terrain, but no one would think to look there." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "And you, would you come too?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to address. "I could visit, bring supplies," Vincent offered carefully. "But I should stay here, keep up appearances. If we both disappeared, it would raise questions." Jessie nodded, disappointment flickering across her face before she masked it. "When should I leave?" "We'll leave tomorrow night," Vincent decided. "I'll tell folks in town I'm going hunting for a few days. That will explain my absence while I get you settled." As they prepared for the journey the next day, a tension had developed between them, unspoken words and feelings circling like leaves caught in an eddy. Jessie packed the few belongings she had acquired during her stay, along with some of the money from her saddlebags, while Vincent gathered supplies and prepared the horses. They set out after sunset, traveling by moonlight to avoid being seen. The journey was difficult, leading them through rugged terrain that tested both riders and mounts. By dawn, they had reached the foothills, where they made camp in a secluded grove to rest during daylight hours. As Jessie gathered firewood, Vincent caught himself watching her movements, the grace with which she navigated the forest, the strength that had returned to her body as her wound healed. In the dappled morning light, with pine needles in her hair and determination in her eyes, she was breathtaking. "See something interesting?" she called, catching his stare. Vincent smiled sheepishly. "Just thinking you look more natural out here than you did playing housewife yesterday." "I don't know about that," Jessie replied, dropping the wood beside their small fire. "I rather enjoyed being Mrs. Zachariah for a day." There was teasing in her tone, but something sincere beneath it. "You played the part well," Vincent acknowledged, stoking the fire. "Almost had me convinced." Their eyes met across the flames, and for a moment neither spoke. Then Jessie looked away, busying herself with unpacking food. "Tell me about this cabin," she said, changing the subject. "Why does a man who wants solitude need 2 homes?" Vincent accepted the shift in conversation. "William, my friend, he used it as a hunting lodge, but also as a place to escape when the memories got too loud. After Appomattox, some of us couldn't settle. The cabin became a refuge for soldiers who needed time away from the world. I went there myself after." He trailed off, the words sticking in his throat. Jessie waited, giving him space to continue or not. "After I lost my family," he finally said. The admission felt like pulling a splinter-sharp pain, then relief. "My wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Emma. Influenza took them both while I was at war." "I'm sorry," Jessie said softly. "I didn't know." Vincent nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. "It's why I came west. Too many ghosts back east. For a long time I thought being alone was safer." "And now?" Jessie asked, her question barely audible over the crackling fire. Vincent met her gaze again. "Now I'm not so sure." They reached the cabin by nightfall the following day, both exhausted from the journey. The structure was small but solid, nestled against a rocky outcropping that provided natural protection from the elements and unwanted eyes. Inside was basic but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom, and minimal furnishings. "It's perfect," Jesse said, turning slowly to take in the space. "A true hiding place." Vincent lit lamps and started a fire while Jesse explored. The domesticity of their movements felt natural, as if they'd done this dance many times before. When the cabin was warm and their simple dinner prepared, they sat at the rough-hewn table, the silence between them companionable rather than strained. "How long will you stay?" Jesse asked as they finished eating. "A day or two," Vincent replied. "Need to make sure you're settled and the trail is completely covered." She nodded, her eyes on the fire. "And then I'll come back in 2 weeks with more supplies." He hesitated before adding, "Unless you decide to move on before then." Jesse looked up at him sharply. "Why would I do that?" Vincent shrugged. "You have the money, the means to go anywhere, start fresh. I wouldn't blame you for taking the chance while you have it." "Is that what you want, for me to disappear?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Vincent chose his answer carefully. "What I want is for you to be safe and free to choose your own path." "And if my path led back to your ranch someday?" Jesse asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent felt his heart quicken. "Then I'd leave a light burning." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Jesse stood, gathering their plates. "We should rest. It's been a long day." That night, Vincent took the small sofa while Jesse used the bedroom. Sleep eluded him as he listened to the mountain winds and thought about the woman behind the closed door, the outlaw who had become something else entirely in his eyes. Something precious and unexpected. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They spent the day securing the cabin, chopping wood, and exploring the immediate surroundings. Vincent showed Jesse the creek for water, the best hunting trails, and a hidden cave that could serve as emergency shelter if needed. "You've thought of everything," she remarked as they hiked back to the cabin. "I've learned that preparation often means the difference between survival and tragedy," Vincent replied, "especially in places this remote." As they walked, their hands brushed accidentally, then deliberately, until their fingers intertwined. Neither acknowledged this development, but neither pulled away either. That evening, Vincent announced his intention to leave at dawn. "The sooner I get back and establish my regular routine, the less suspicious anyone will be." Jesse nodded, though sadness touched her eyes. "Will you really come back in 2 weeks?" "I promised, didn't I? People have made promises before," she said simply. Vincent moved to stand before her, taking both her hands in his. "Jesse Blackburn, I am not those people. When I say I'll return, I will." She studied his face, searching for deceit and finding none. "I believe you," she finally said, "though I'm not sure why." "Perhaps for the same reason I believed you when you said you never killed anyone," Vincent suggested. "Sometimes we recognize truth, even from unlikely sources." Jessie smiled at that, a genuine smile that transformed her face. On impulse, Vincent raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture, old-fashioned and courtly, brought a blush to her cheeks. "What was that for?" she asked. "A promise," he replied, "sealed properly." That night, sleep came no easier. Vincent lay awake thinking of all the things left unsaid between them, the growing feelings he was hesitant to name, the uncertain future they faced. By dawn, he had made a decision. Before he left, he placed a small carved wooden bird on the table, alongside a note, "For new beginnings. Until we meet again." The 2 weeks apart were the longest of Vincent's life. He returned to his ranch, explained his absence as a successful hunting trip, and resumed his normal activities. If the townspeople found him more withdrawn than usual, they attributed it to his solitary nature, rather than to thoughts occupied by an auburn-haired outlaw hidden in the mountains. The marshal and his deputies departed Yarrington after a week, convinced their quarry had moved on. Vincent overheard in the saloon that the reward for information about the Cimarron Rose had been increased to $700, a sign that the authorities remained determined to bring her to justice. On the appointed day, Vincent packed supplies and headed into the mountains, his heart lighter with each mile that brought him closer to Jessie. When he finally crested the ridge overlooking the cabin, he was surprised to see smoke curling from the chimney and the surrounding area transformed. A small garden had been started, herbs hung drying from the porch rafters, and the path had been neatly marked with stones. As he approached, the door swung open and Jessie emerged, her face breaking into a radiant smile at the sight of him. She had changed in subtle ways her skin sun-kissed from outdoor work, her hair braided simply down her back, her movements more relaxed and open. "You came back," she said as he dismounted. "I said I would," Vincent replied, drinking in the sight of her. "You've been busy." Jessie gestured to the improvements. "I needed something to occupy my hands and mind. Turns out I enjoy building more than destroying." She helped him unload the supplies, their conversation flowing easily as they caught each other up on the past 2 weeks. Inside, Vincent noticed more changes: curtains made from old fabric, carefully crafted wooden utensils, and a collection of wildflowers on the table beside his carved bird. "You've made it a home," he observed. "For now," Jessie replied, though there was a contentment in her voice that hadn't been there before. "I've been thinking about what comes next." Vincent felt a twinge of apprehension. "Oh," she motioned for him to sit, taking the chair opposite him. "I can't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later I need to decide who I'm going to be." "And who is that?" Vincent asked carefully. Jessie took a deep breath. "Someone honest, someone who builds things instead of taking them." She met his gaze directly. "I've been thinking about California, like I mentioned before. Starting fresh where no one knows me." Vincent felt his heart sink, though he'd known this moment would come. "That sounds sensible," he managed. "But," she continued, reaching across the table to take his hand, "I find myself reluctant to leave Nevada entirely." Hope stirred in Vincent's chest. "Is that so?" "There's someone here who saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself," Jessie said softly. "Someone who risked everything to help a stranger, someone I've grown to care for deeply." Vincent turned his hand to clasp hers. "Jessie, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I know what I'm asking isn't fair. You have a reputation, a life you've built. Being connected to someone like me could ruin that, but I needed you to know how I feel before I make any decisions." Vincent stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Jessie Blackburn, when you rode onto my land bleeding and half-conscious, I thought you were bringing trouble. I never imagined you were bringing life, bringing me back to living after years of just existing." He cupped her face with one hand. "I don't care about reputation or what others might think. I care about you, about us. Whatever comes next, I want to face it together." Jessie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Are you certain? I come with a complicated past." "And I don't," Vincent smiled. "Perhaps that's why we understand each other." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, she rose on her toes to meet him, their lips connecting in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. When they parted, Jessie rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "So what happens now?" she asked. Vincent held her close, savoring the weight and warmth of her in his arms. "Now we figure it out together, one day at a time." The solution came to them that night as they sat by the fire, discussing possibilities for their future. Vincent proposed a plan that was both daring and practical. They would stage Jessie's death to give her a fresh start. With the authorities believing the Cimarron Rose had perished, Jessie would be free to build a new life. But how? She asked, intrigued by the idea. Your clothes, your horse. We leave evidence along the river gorge suggesting you fell during a crossing, Vincent explained. The spring melt makes the currents dangerous. No one would question a body being swept away, never to be recovered. Jessie considered the plan. And then, after an appropriate period of mourning for my wife who tragically fell ill and died, I introduced the community to my new bride, Jessica Zachariah, recently arrived from the East. A completely new identity, Jessie mused. Could it really work? With your money and my land, we could build something special, Vincent said, excitement growing as he spoke. Expand the ranch, raise horses instead of just cattle. Create the life we both want. Jessie's eyes sparkled with possibility. A legitimate business built with illegitimate funds. There's poetry in that. Restitution of sorts, Vincent agreed. Using the money to create something good, something that helps the community. They spent the night refining their plan, addressing potential complications and building a future together that neither had imagined possible weeks earlier. By morning, their course was set. Over the next month, they put their plan into motion. Vincent gathered the necessary items to stage Jessie's death, while she remained hidden at the cabin. They crafted a detailed backstory for Jessica Zachariah, incorporating enough truth to be convincing while obscuring the details that might connect her to the notorious Cimarron gang. When everything was prepared, Vincent executed the final stage, deliberately leaving Jessie's distinctive hat and a torn piece of her dress caught on rocks near the most dangerous section of the river gorge. He reported finding these items to the sheriff in Yarrington, who organized a brief search before concluding that the female outlaw had indeed met her end in the treacherous waters. 2 months later, Vincent Zachariah returned from a trip to Carson City with his new bride, a quiet, refined woman who charmed the townspeople with her warm smile and obvious devotion to her husband. If anyone noticed her resemblance to the wanted posters that had once hung in the sheriff's office, they kept their suspicions to themselves. After all, respectable Jessica Zachariah, with her Eastern education and gentle manners, could hardly be the same woman as the notorious outlaw. With the money from Jessie's last robbery, they purchased additional land and breeding stock, transforming Vincent's modest ranch into a prosperous horse breeding operation. They named it Second Chance Ranch, a private acknowledgement of the fresh start they'd both been given. As the seasons passed, their partnership deepened into a love that surprised them both with its intensity and resilience. Vincent found in Jessie a strength and determination that matched his own, while she discovered in him a steadfastness she'd never known in her tumultuous life. A year after Jessie's death, they welcomed their first child, a son they named William, after Vincent's friend who had unknowingly provided the sanctuary where their love had first blossomed. Standing on the porch of their expanded home with their son sleeping peacefully in her arms, Jessie looked out over the land that had become truly hers. "You ever regret it?" she asked Vincent, who stood beside her with his arm around her shoulders. "Taking in a wounded outlaw, risking everything for someone you didn't know." Vincent pressed a kiss to her temple. "Not for a single moment. You were worth every risk." Jessie leaned into his embrace, the peace she'd found still feeling like a miracle. "Sometimes I wake up thinking it's all a dream, that I'll open my eyes and be back on the run, alone and hunted." "And when you do open your eyes?" Vincent asked. "I see you," she replied simply. "And I remember that some stories do have happy endings, even for people who don't deserve them." Vincent turned her gently to face him. You deserved a chance to become who you truly are, not who circumstances forced you to be. We all do. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the land in gold and shadow, Vincent and Jesse Zachariah stood together, two souls who had found in each other the healing they both desperately needed, a former soldier haunted by loss, and a former outlaw running from her past, now building a future neither had dared to imagine. 3 years later, the Zachariah Ranch had become one of the most respected horse breeding operations in Nevada territory. Their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock brought buyers from as far as San Francisco, and their home had expanded to accommodate their growing family, which now included William and a 1-year-old daughter named Emma, after Vincent's first child. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on their porch watching William play with a wooden horse Vincent had carved, a rider approached along the main road. Vincent instinctively moved to stand in front of Jesse, old habits of protection dying hard. The visitor, a well-dressed man in his 50s, dismounted and removed his hat. Mr. Zachariah, my name is James Hartford. I represent the Central Pacific Railroad. Vincent relaxed slightly but remained cautious. What can I do for you, Mr. Hartford? The man smiled. I've heard excellent things about your horses. We're looking to purchase a significant number for our operations throughout the territory. Wondered if we might discuss terms. As Vincent invited the man inside for refreshments, Jesse met his eyes with a small, private smile. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The very railroad company she had once robbed was now a potential major client for their legitimate business. Later that night, after securing a substantial contract with Hartford and putting the children to bed, Vincent found Jesse standing by the window, looking out at the land that had become their sanctuary. Life has a strange way of coming full circle, she said as he joined her. Vincent wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Are you thinking about the past? I was thinking about the first night I spent in your barn, bleeding and certain I was going to die, Jesse replied, leaning back against him. How terrified I was when you found me. How sure I was that you'd turn me in. And now here you are, a respectable businesswoman selling horses to the very people you once robbed, Vincent said with a soft chuckle. Jessie turned in his arms, her expression serious. I want to pay it back, Vincent. Not just by building something good here, but actually returning what I took. Vincent studied her face. You're talking about the money. We've used most of it to build the ranch. Not all of it, Jesse reminded him. There's still a fair amount hidden away. I've been thinking we could establish a foundation anonymously, of course to help women and children in difficult situations. The kind of help I needed when I was 18 and desperate. Vincent's heart swelled with pride and love. I think that's a wonderful idea. A true way to turn that chapter of your life into something meaningful. There's more, Jesse continued. I want to teach our children the value of honesty and integrity. I don't ever want them to feel that crime is their only option, no matter what challenges they face. Our children will know nothing but love and security, Vincent promised. And they'll learn those values by watching us live them every day. Jessie reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the laugh lines that had deepened over the years they'd spent together. When I was with the Cimarron gang, I never imagined a future beyond the next job, the next town. I certainly never dreamed of this: a home, a family, a man who knows every part of me, good and bad, and loves me anyway. Not anyway, Vincent corrected gently. Because of all those parts. They made you who you are, the woman who has brought more joy into my life than I ever thought possible after losing Sarah and Emma. They sealed their conversation with a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of their years together, along with the promise of many more to come. By their 10th anniversary, the Zachariah family had grown to include 4 children: William, Emma, and twin boys, Thomas and James. Second Chance Ranch had expanded to become one of the largest operations in the region, with a reputation that extended throughout the Western Territories. The Jesse Blackburn Foundation, established anonymously through a lawyer in San Francisco, had helped dozens of women and children escape desperate situations and build new lives. Though no one ever connected the charitable organization to the respectable Mrs. Zachariah of Yerington, Nevada, both Vincent and Jesse took quiet pride in the good it accomplished. On a crisp autumn evening, as they celebrated their anniversary with a private picnic on the ridge overlooking their property, Vincent presented Jesse with a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked, surprised by the unexpected gift. "Open it and see," he urged. Inside, she found a beautifully crafted silver locket. When she opened it, she discovered a tiny painting on one side, a perfect miniature of their family, and on the other, an inscription: "For the woman who taught me that second chances are worth the risk." Tears filled Jesse's eyes as Vincent fastened the locket around her neck. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Just like the life we've built," Vincent replied, taking her hand and gazing out over their land, the barns and corrals, the sprawling ranch house, the orchard they'd planted when William was born. "Did you ever imagine when you were bleeding in my barn that night that we'd end up here?" Jessie shook her head. "Never. I expected to die young, probably violently, certainly alone." She squeezed his hand. "You saved more than my body that night, Vincent. You saved my soul." "We saved each other," he corrected, "and continue to do so every day." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant golds and purples, Vincent and Jesse Zachariah sat together on the ridge that overlooked everything they'd built, a testament to the power of second chances, redemption, and a love that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances. The wounded train robber and the solitary cowboy had found in each other not just healing for their wounds, both physical and spiritual, but a future brighter than either had dared to dream. Their story, known only to them, had transformed from one of desperation and loneliness to one of hope, growth, and enduring love, proof that even the most damaged hearts can find wholeness when they find each other.